Okay, thank you for joining us, everyone. We're going to get started. And just a few logistical notes here. First, this webinar is being recorded and we will send out the recording once it is completed. Second, there will be a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. You should see an option for you to submit a question on your control panel. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar. You do not need to wait until the end of the webinar, and we will get to as many questions as possible. But if we don't, we will reply by email. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eduardo Aguilar to get us started. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you, Rosanna. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We know it's really close to the holidays, and so we appreciate you taking the time to be on this call. We're really excited to bring together a great group of folks to share with you some of their work, as well as some of the best practices that they're seeing both across the state and even within their own districts around how linked learning and expanded learning are being implemented and the benefits that they're seeing as a result of this very exciting and innovative approach to surrounding kids with not just academic supports, but with a whole slew of social emotional supports. And so with us today, we have folks from the Connect Ed, Teresa Esparago, who's a Senior Program Associate. We also have on the line Jessica Gunderson from Partnership for Children and Youth. And from Sacramento City College, we have Monroe Howard and Teresa McEwen. And so throughout the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to hear from each of them. And at the end of the presentation, as Rosanna mentioned, there will be a question and answer session. And so if you have questions that are specific to any of the speakers, feel free to include that within the question that you post. Otherwise, we'll just be fielding them as a group and answering as many as we can on the call, and then providing some follow-up notes and responses after the presentation. So thank you for joining us, and we're going to jump right into it. Okay, so just a quick overview of what we will be covering today. We're going to open up with just reviewing the overarching themes for the webinar, and so that'll be an opportunity to kind of let you know what we're going to be covering. We're going to be really going into both linked learning and expanded learning, so for those of you that are still learning about these two approaches, this will be a great opportunity to get some really kind of snapshot introduction into them, and for those of you that are seasoned pros, this will be an opportunity to just kind of reinforce some of what you already know, as well as get some insights into research that's being conducted and opportunities that we're seeing throughout the state. We're going to then dive into a conversation with Monroe and Teresa with Sacramento City Unified, who will be able to share about their efforts in implementing both of these approaches within the Sacramento City Unified District. And then we'll close out with an opportunity to highlight how you can leverage the local control funding formula to really embed these two approaches within your district's overall instructional plans. And then, as you can see here, we'll close it out with the question and answer session at the end. So diving right in, we're going to go, as you all know, we're here to talk about linked learning, expanded learning, and talking about how these key strategies are impacting the ability for our schools to really help students graduate college and career ready. As you may have already encountered with the Common Core, this is at the heart of the work that's really taking place, and so both of these approaches provide great vehicles for districts to begin implementing some innovative practices within their school sites that help ensure that by the time their students walk out of there as graduates, they have the skill set to not only be successful in college, but to be prepared to take on those career opportunities once they are at that phase. The other overarching theme that we will cover today is really what does implementation look like, and we're going to have a very real conversation that, highlighting the challenges and the solutions that have been implemented along the way, and so this will help provide an opportunity for folks that may not have had the experience of implementing yet to really get a real sense for what it looks like, so that it'll hopefully temper any concerns that you might have with moving forward with either of these approaches within your instructional plan. And then finally, really going to be providing a very quick overview about the local control funding formula for those folks that are not familiar with it, but also being able to share out some promising practices that we're seeing within the field as to how both linked learning and expanded learning are being incorporated within the local control accountability plans. So, starting with kind of an overview of linked learning and expanded learning, really what these two approaches allow us to do is to move away from a Winchester Mystery House approach to education. And for those of you that are not familiar with the Winchester Mystery House, This is a mansion in San Jose that was cobbled together by the wife or the heir to the Winchester fortune, who essentially created a whole mass of rooms that had very little purpose, but that were just kind of added onto the house. For her purposes, it was to hide off the ghosts. Great place to go check out if you're ever in the area. But really how it relates to our conversation here is that over the years, what we've seen is education has been subject to a whole series of what seem to be random add-ons. And so there are your flavor of the year type of programs that get brought in, and depending on the leadership in your district or somebody that has some influence, there is a big push to integrate these programs. But what tends to happen is these programs tend to not necessarily have a big picture in mind with regard to implementation. And so you see some niche successes at certain campuses, but ultimately with either the transition of time or the transition of personnel, that programming tends to then go away with them. And so really both linked learning and expanded learning provide an excellent opportunity to really help build a sustainable model of programming for your students that is really going to help them achieve what we're all hoping to achieve, which is college and career ready students. And so really what both linked learning and expanded learning allow us to do is deliver a higher quality of instruction. And so as we're shifting over to the Common Core, both of these vehicles really provide an opportunity to help develop the capacity for your instructors, not just those that are in the actual regular day classroom, but those that are interacting with your students in space outside of your classroom, to make sure that they're incorporating some practices and strategies that ensure that students are getting the most out of those sessions, but also building their capacity to take that information and move forward with it. The other exciting components of both linked learning and expanded learning is the hands-on experiences that students have access to as a result of the programming that is made available to them. Through these experiences, they're able to develop some critical thinking, and so shifting from really just presenting information to students and then testing their ability to remember it, we're really presenting information to students, engaging them in a dialogue, and then looking at how much of that information they retain by creating those hands-on projects that they have to develop and work collaboratively to create and present out to their peers. And so that really gives a new experience for students when it comes to acquiring that knowledge that we know is going to benefit them long term. And really what we're seeing as a result of this change in how instruction is delivered and the engaging portion of the hands-on experience is that students are are engaged as more active learners within the process. So no longer are they simply sitting at their desk reading through books and responding through tests or essays, but that they're sitting at their desk, taking in that information, talking to their peers, asking questions to their teacher, looking for resources that outside of the classroom themselves to make sure that they're bringing back high-quality pieces into their collaborations, and then moving forward as a team. So all excellent skills that will benefit them and directly relate to the 21st century learning skills that we're hoping that they acquire. And so what linked learning and expanded learning both do is provide an opportunity to really integrate some instructional practices at the school site level. So unlike other programs that can divorce previous efforts from what is presently being pushed, both linked learning and expanded learning create an opportunity to build on top of successes at the local school site level, and we'll be able to talk about that in a bit. But really, it creates an opportunity to increase course alignment, not just for the career tracks that students are on, but through those career tracks, they're able to acquire that experience with relevancy so that what they're learning in the classroom, they're able to actually apply with their peers. The instruction is all student-centered when it's implemented in a high-quality format. We see great evidence of this within the expanded learning realm, where students have the opportunity to really identify the types of coursework and experiences that they would like to see, and then work with their local after-school team to make sure that those opportunities are presented to them. We also see that students get access to structured learning outside of the traditional day, and so no longer are students simply learning from 8 to 3, but really what we're seeing is that through the collaborations and the partnerships that come out of the linked learning and expanded learning time, students now have access to a whole host of internships, partnerships, and really the relationship building that will benefit their longer term growth, both in terms of getting letters of recommendation or career opportunities that really help bolster their success long term. And then finally, it gives the students an opportunity to really pursue some non-academic interests that they might have. And so some examples off the top of my head here in Sacramento City Unified is at one of our local high schools, students were really drawn to a music program, and so they worked together with their after-school team and now have a music production studio at their school that is producing CDs and audio files for their peers. And it's a completely student-driven process, and so it's exciting to see how students are taking and running with it and what's coming out of it. And so all of this is wonderful to hear, but the question is, how do we get it in our district? And so there's going to be some talk about funding streams that have been made available by the state a little later on in the presentation. But really, what today's presentation is going to focus on is elevating the types of strategies that we're seeing work and being able to show you how to integrate that into your local control accountability plan that your district needs to submit as a requirement for the local control funding formula. And so really, as you can see by the bullets here, the goal today is to identify those promising practices, help you think about some targeted goals that you may want to help your district set that relate back to linked learning and expanded learning, so you can leverage that as you're moving forward in your district. Showing you or talking about some models of gathering stakeholder input to make sure that the programming and the instruction that you're putting into place is meeting the actual site and community need and leveraging those local site and community resources. That relates to the next bullet, which is really engaging those community members in that process, because there's a whole wealth of untapped resources that are available to folks that really open up and want to be engaged. And these two approaches are wonderful vehicles for really creating that sense of engagement between the schools and the communities that they serve, and ultimately being able to leverage those community resources to support student growth moving forward. So with all that being said, I'm going to turn the mic over to Teresa at ConnectEd, who will be sharing some more detailed information about linked learning. Teresa?
Thank you, Eduardo, and good morning, everyone. Eduardo, thank you for that wonderful introduction of framing the conversation around linked learning and expanded learning, and how by combining the two, you're not only providing more opportunities for students, so not just more opportunities in numbers, but really providing a coherent frame for students so that what they're learning in school and out of school is connected, that it's student-centered, that it involves the community and input. And a lot of those components are what we do within our approach at ConnectEd called linked learning. So just for those of you that are not familiar with ConnectEd or linked learning, ConnectEd is a nonprofit organization in Berkeley that partners with communities to support linked learning. That's what we do, and the approach to education, which you can see on this slide here, I have the definition, which says linked learning is an approach to education that transforms the traditional high school experience by preparing students for both college and career. In the past, many of you know, students were tracked. The more academically inclined students were on the college track, whereas other students that may not have done so well academically were on the career track or vocational ed. But what we are seeing with linked learning is that by combining rigorous academics, so a college prep academics with a technical core, this is not the technical core or the vocational ed of the old day, but a real world career themed technical courses, kind of introductions to what you might see in a college major, but infused into the high school experience as a course within their course of study, their program of study over 4 years, but also integrating work-based learning experiences, like Eduardo said, internships, mentorships, job shadows, etc., and having the integrated student supports that students need in order to be successful in college, career, and in community and civic readiness. So that's just a snapshot of kind of what we mean when we say linked learning. And our work with Children Now and Partnerships for Children and Youth, and even with Sac City, what we're going to talk about today really fits within that fourth component, integrated student support, but it's really all of it, and providing, like I said, a coherent experience for students so that all of these things that they're learning during the school day, the academics, the technical core, and the work-based learning, can also be continued through the expanded learning time. But one thing I do want to mention, with LCFF and the LCAPs, there's a lot of talk about community engagement. And having a shared vision for students and what you want to achieve for your students in your districts, and really keeping students at the center. And one of the ways that ConnectEd supports districts is working with them through the creation of a graduate profile. And you'll hear a little bit more about the graduate profile, I'm sure, from Sac City Unified in a minute. But before they get into it, I just want to give you a brief definition of it. Essentially, when ConnectEd works with districts to create this graduate profile, the graduate profile essentially defines the knowledge, skills, dispositions of what a district wants their graduates to look like upon graduation. So what they want their students to look like when they graduate, and essentially how they define college and career readiness for their students. So you'll hear a little bit more about this in Sac City, but this is one way that districts can provide a shared vision and coherence by keeping students at the center. Next slide, please. Oh, one back. There we go. So, one of the questions that we get asked often is, how do we know linked learning works? Well, SRI International has done an evaluation of the work that ConnectEd has been doing with our Linked Learning District Initiative here in California. And in their Year 5 report, they have found that linked learning students earn more credits in their first year of high school, which means they are meeting all of their credits for graduation. They're also reporting greater confidence in life and career. So students have confidence to not only do well in school, but also in careers, so they feel more comfortable and confident within their workplace. And students are experiencing more rigorous and integrated and relevant instruction. So not only is the work harder and integrated within their schools, so integrating all of those core content areas with the career theme, but also students see the relevance in their course offerings. They're not saying, why do I need to know this? They can see why they're learning geometry to build bridges. They can see the connections between science and engineering. And lastly, students are more likely to stay in their school district throughout high school. So showing the students are more engaged. They don't want to leave. They don't want to hop around and look for a different place to go, but they're really more engaged. So that's just a brief snapshot of linked learning and what it is. And we're here to answer more questions about it, but I'm sure you'll hear more about linked learning and how linked learning and expanded learning can work together. And also our friends in Sac City will talk a little bit more about how they're doing the work. All right, so I'm going to pass the mic over to Jessica Gunderson from Partnership for Children and Youth to talk a little bit more about expanded learning.
Great, thank you so much, Teresa. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jessica Gunderson. I work with the Partnership for Children and Youth. And in case you don't know about our organization, we work with schools, community-based organizations, policymakers, city and other city agencies around the state to improve the quality and access of expanded learning time and community schools with a focus on low-income communities. So what do we mean by expanded learning? Expanded learning is the umbrella term for after-school, summer, and intersession programs. Basically, the learning and enrichment programs that serve students outside of the, quote, traditional school day and year. Core components of these programs include a blending of both education and enrichment, and that blending is very important. These programs should complement but not replicate the school day, so they're about really expanding what's happening in the school day rather than more of the same. These programs are often operated and or delivered in partnership with community-based organizations and or other city agencies and organizations. And just a few points on why these programs are so important. For students that regularly and fully participate in state and federally funded programs, they can gain up to 90 extra days of learning. Yes, 90 extra days, which is almost half the school year. Research has shown that high quality expanded learning programs positively impact student outcomes, including academic performance, social emotional skills, student engagement and school attendance, as well as English language development. So let's talk about what our infrastructure here is in California. California has the largest investment in expanded learning programs in the United States, more than all 49 states combined. Though the majority of this funding goes to K through 8 programs, in California, we use our federal funding, about $60 million, to support the after-school safety and education for teens program, also known as ASSETS. And this program is specifically targeted to support high school programs. There are over 260 sites funded, and these programs receive up to $250,000 per site annually. These, I'm not going to lie, these are really highly competitive grants. In the last round of funding, less than 25% of applications were funded, but we'll move on to a map that shows where these programs are funded, and it's really across the whole state. Moving on, Eduardo provided some really good examples earlier on in this presentation, so I'm not going to go over this too much, but as you are all likely putting together, there's a lot of synergy between linked learning and expanded learning efforts. Specifically, they're both focused on supporting college and career readiness. They employ similar programmatic strategies, and they have shared target populations, as well as a strong foundation in youth development and community engagement. This really presents both a need and opportunity for school districts and their partners to build more intentionality and collaboration between these initiatives, rather than continue to keep them siloed. And you're going to hear a great example through Sac City. How we have seen this collaboration happen is, first is really just the recognizing and leveraging that there is a need for more time to provide students with a full pathway experience. The current 8-to-2 model is really outdated, and first is just the recognition and honoring that for students to be competitive, there has to be really more time and more intentionality. In the ways we've seen this this unique time and space leverage is a space to provide students with work-based learning and internship experiences that support their pathway development. This is also a time and space to provide additional academic supports, project-based learning opportunities, as well as credit recovery. In this time and space, we also find that many programs and schools are providing activities focused on college and career readiness support, including mentorship, counseling, field trips, and other student supports. And then this time and space is also used to provide activities that promote youth leadership and skill development through really community engagement, and really getting young people out and engaged in their community, whether it's businesses, other schools, or other community-based organizations. And so moving on to the last one, I just wanted to, as a group on this call, we've started digging deeper into where these overlapping infrastructures exist from really a resource perspective. And so what you're looking at is a draft map. We're still in the draft stage, that shows where there's an overlap in ASSETS programs and linked learning pilot programs, which are also known as AB 790 districts. And we know that there's over 17 school districts across the state that have multiple, are receiving both linked learning and ASSETS funding. And the color scheme you'll see on the map, and again, I will send this out to everyone on the call so they can really look at the map more closely, since it's pretty small. The darker areas emphasize increased overlap, meaning that there are multiple sites that are receiving dual funding. What we know now is there's a lot of high school sites that are running linked learning programs and really strong assets programs that are not necessarily talking together. So we're trying to map this out so people can really get a visual understanding of how much opportunity there is. And we are also attempting to do this with the Career Pathways Trust, which is another funding stream we don't have time to go into today that supports linked learning. So once we overlay this map with Career Pathways Trust, you'll see that this overlap only grows more. So with all that said, I know I moved through quickly. I'm going to pass the mic back on to Eduardo. Eduardo?
Oh my God.
Sorry, I was on mute.
It happens.
Apologies, everyone. Thank you, Jessica and Teresa, for providing that quick overview. And we do apologize for folks for not being able to dive deeper into some of these areas, and funding, I know, being a key area of interest for folks. But we wanted to kind of create a grounding in both the linked learning and expanded learning field as we jump into our next part of the presentation, which is an opportunity to hear what the actual implementation looks like within a large urban school district, that being here in Sacramento City Unified. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Teresa McEwen to share about the linked learning here in Sac City.
Thank you, Eduardo. And so people ask us in Sac City, or say, oh, you're doing, great things. Tell us what you're doing. And the first thing that I would like to make sure that all of you know is that we have been involved in this work for over a decade. We are part of the statewide initiative for linked learning, sometimes called the DI-9 or the District Initiative 9, the 9 districts that have been involved in linked learning for 6 years. But prior to that time, we were involved with Small Schools Movement, some of the work coming out of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Carnegie Foundation funding the work, and we do have a number of small standalone high schools with linked learning pathways in our district. And the other thing I think that would be important to know is that while this began as a reform movement, that we are moving and abandoned or made every effort to abandon the word reform and look at redesign, and kind of going back to that slide Eduardo had at the beginning, with the Winchester Mystery House, or renovation and not demolition, is to really look at the space that we have and redesign, knowing that the comprehensive high school in many ways and shapes was designed for a world that existed 100 years ago but no longer exists today. So looking at what are the strengths, the positives, and what we have, and not fixing something that's broken, but looking at how we can redesign and take advantage of all of the opportunities that we have available, the support from our business and community partners, to create a design that works for us, for youth today who will be leaders in the rest of our century. So to me and to the people I work with, that's very important. That lens of redesigning and an opportunity to use the best of what we have, take that and create going forward. And that knowing that when our district rewrote, updated its strategic plan approximately 4 years ago, having been in this work for a little while, that college and career readiness is pillar 1 of the 3 pillars of our strategic plan. That front and center, everything we do is about preparing our students for college and career readiness. The emphasis on career readiness, as folks have been saying, making sure that our young people graduate ready to take full advantage of all that adult life has to offer them, a career of their choice, active engagement in our community, in particular Sacramento here being the state capital, taking advantage to be fully involved in community governmental affairs, opportunity to impact public policy, not just for the local Sacramento community, but across the state. And in that, some of the work, and probably hard to underestimate the work, but is our graduate profile. Again, people look at it and then say, wow, nice graduate profile. Not only do we have a graduate profile that shows what we want or tells what we want our graduates to know and be able to do the day they walk that stage upon graduation, but we've benchmarked it back to grades 3, 6, 8, 10, and 12, and the 5 critical areas that we identified on our graduate profile. 3 years in the making, and it's going through the process now for board adoption, but really taking time to reach out to all segments of the community to find out from all stakeholders, our students, our business partners, our community partners, our parents, our employees, what is it that they want our young people to know and be able to do when they graduate, and really an opportunity for everybody to buy in. So spent a lot of time with social emotional learning, folks, making sure that they see themselves in our graduate profile, that the Common Core is front and center in our graduate profile, opportunities for expanded learning and the powerful work that's happening in that space to be included, so that this document, along with the redesign approach, allows everybody to feel that they have a seat at the table. Everybody is strongly committed and involved in the effort. And this long-term work that we are definitely committed, and I know people have talked about, you know, college or career and college and career, and I jokingly, you know, talk to some people saying, you know, this whole work is dependent on these two tiny, tiny words moving from or to and, but just that movement and that mindset to go to college and career is huge and affects every single aspect of what we do in the K-12 space, and extremely powerful as we're moving and looking at how we can use in a different way the funding that comes, the local control funding formula, monies from Linked Learning, monies from the Career Pathways Trust, expanded learning. They're really looking back to that graduate profile. What is it that we want our young students, our young people to know and be able to do? And then using all available resources in a braided way, in a holistic way, inclusive way, to make sure that all students graduate ready for college and career, so that the choice is for the student and his or her family to make, and not for the institution to make. And then in this work, what are some of the lessons that we learned? I think some of the initial challenges is, you know, going back kind of that Winchester Mystery House, that it was like, oh, we're going to add on, you know, we have our program, our 6-period day, and now we're going to add on Linked Learning, or we're going to add these things on, and that it was more of a program, and that people, I think, had the mindset early on that, well, we're going to add it on and do it and play nice for a couple of years, but when the grant funding goes away, so goes this away. Another area, and I kind of referred to it talking about the reform, that it was seen that maybe there was something wrong with the people or the work that was being done in the high school space, so that somebody was coming from the outside to do or reform or make us better. And also, initially when we started with this program, looking back, we all see that it was implemented programmatically, that we looked at, well, let's put this program at this school, or maybe that school, or maybe a pathway within a comprehensive high school, but we really didn't look at the systemness and the system change. It wasn't until we really started working on our graduate profile and got deep in that, that we realized that this is not a program and something that we can do for some kids some days, but that it really takes the entire change, that whole shift of mindset from college or career to college and career. And so I think for us, some of the things that I think have worked is that we've been at this for a long time and staying the course, and we have a new superintendent who joined us in August and very much committed to this effort. So as leadership changes, as principals change, that we have been staying the course, that as we have opportunity to hire staff, be it in an after-school program or Linked Learning or consultant or classroom teachers, that they really are committed to college and career for all students, not some students some days, but even I've been working of late very closely with our special ed department and making sure that we look at opportunities for all students to be involved in this effort. Again, as I was referring to, you know, that move to redesign, it really gives an opportunity for folks doing the work, the classroom teacher, the site administrator, the counselor, in many cases even the students, as Eduardo was talking about, that opportunity where they will come and say, you know, Ms. McEwen or the principal calls and says, my students have this idea and they would like to do, really an opportunity to own the work and shape the work. And that has been huge for us the more and more we get into Linked Learning, because when I talk Linked Learning, and you heard from my colleague Teresa who was talking about the 4 components, we do expect schools to implement the 4 components over time as they're implementing their pathways or deepening their pathways, but really an opportunity for them to own the work and build on their strengths. So Linked Learning is not a model that looks a certain way, but it's an approach, a set of strategies, an attitude, the values that come in how we do the work, and will look different, may look different from site to site. So even 2 or 3 engineering pathways can look a little bit different depending on the strengths of the teachers, the business partners, the interests of the students. And finally, I think what has been important for us, at least in the last couple of years, is really addressing this as a system-wide approach in changing the way that we do business and in serving students. So I feel primed for full implementation of the Common Core state standards and the switch in the funding, the local control funding formula, because of the systemness with which we're approaching this work.
Thank you, Teresa. Now we're going to turn it over to Monroe to talk about expanded learning in Sac City Unified.
So good morning, everyone. Once again, Monroe Howard, specialist here in youth development with Sac City Unified. I'm very honored to be sitting here next to my colleague Teresa and also Eduardo to speak to you a little bit about the expanded learning experience within SUSD. Currently, we are offering actually over a little bit over 59 programs with 61 programs and sites and serving over 12,000 students daily. We are very fortunate to work with approximately 8 community-based organizations that provide enriching and engaging programming for our young people. And one thing that within the Department of Youth Development, we have decided to approach all of our programming through a social justice youth development framework, in which has 5 core competencies, core tenets for young people, which talk about helping young people develop a positive identity, encouraging collective action, and several other items that are really moving towards those 21st century skills and the things in which our young people need to have in order to be successful not only in college and career but in life. And so we really make sure that we have a concerted effort to train staff and to make sure that individuals are really embodying these core tenets with our social justice youth development framework. I would encourage any of you who would like to know more about that to do a little bit of research. Assistant Professor Sean Jenwright is the author of that, and so it has been very engaging, especially with the fact that those over 12,000 students that we're engaging are really some of our most high-need students who in many cases have been marginalized and who have not had an opportunity to really fully and authentically engage in their educational experience. And we found that the social justice youth development framework and approach has really assisted with that. Our program, they collaborate and coordinate with several key stakeholders. And once again, it's very important that we stress that a lot of this work really hasn't initiated from Teresa and I, but it's been there, that communication on the site, and that consistent collaboration and communication with our after-school site program administrators and our key folks in the Link Learning and the pathways and the departments, and really having very candid and consistent conversations about how after-school programming and Link Learning can intersect and support one another. As mentioned before, our expanded learning programs are made available through the state and federal grants, which are listed there on your slides. And again, once again, from a lot of the in-kind supports from our community-based organizations and other key collaborators.
I think so. This is Teresa again. Some of the lessons that we've learned in working together, and some I referred to a little previously, but start with the end in mind and be very clear and detailed about the end goal, the desired outcome. So for us, with our graduate profile, we're able to consistently and continuously refer to that document. If we feel like we're getting off track a little bit, it's just pull that up and look at it and look at that as our guide to student success. And then taking time and to develop buy-in, to build those relationships, and I feel as educators that's one of our strengths, is building relationships with our students, with each other, and now more and more with the community, with our parents, and then to identify champions as they come, and they come from, in many cases, most unexpected places and quarters, and to support those champions. Staying the course, and then while we have those big huge goals out there, right, that we want 100% of our students to graduate career and college ready, for us it's been successful and helpful to identify annual achievable goals and to celebrate those successes and have fun with this work. We look at this work very much as generational in nature, and we know that we won't get it all done in a year, day, month, but we do have those small successes that we celebrate, and very much celebrate the journey that we're on together.
So some of those benefits that we've seen with integrating linked learning and expanded learning time, first and foremost, when you look at the 4 components of linked learning, 2 of those really have some, awesome direct alignments where we're seeing some awesome benefits, and those would be the integrated student supports and also the work-based learning. And so with the integrated student supports, we are providing daily needed academic and career guidance and social emotional supports in student-centered format. So that's coming in the form of academic labs for various subjects, core content subjects, but that are also given an opportunity for students to design what that support and guidance looks like. Eduardo had mentioned there's one of our schools that have built a recording studio. So, and a lot of that, those components of audio engineering and other electronic pieces that students are able to gather those skills in an engaging way, and that is happening in the before and at the after school space. With the career guidance, really having opportunities to interact with industry professionals coming in several formats, also field trips to different opportunities to expose them to vast careers, and then also the social and emotional supports with our young people, really starting with just first and foremost developing positive relationships with young people. So one thing that expanded learning has had some great success and benefits in connecting with young people in a very authentic way. Being able to embrace young people for where they are, who they are, getting to know their community, getting to know their families, and that whole community in which they come from to deepen a better connection with them. And we've seen some outstanding outcomes with young people and them being connected to the school. Also, when you look at students, they're able to select from a broader course selection, which once again are really student designed. So there's consistent and ongoing surveying of our students about their interests and their needs. And so based on those things, and then also surveying our stakeholders, our parents, and also teachers and site administrators, we're able to have a very dynamic program which does not have to remain the same from semester to semester, and we're able to have a very kind of fluid flow of young people in programming that really captures their interests and yet still prepares them for college and career. Students are also able to maximize opportunities to interact with college students and industry professionals. With the college student piece, that even goes just by our staffing. So a lot of our community-based organizations are very intentional about recruiting young people who are continuing their education in the community college or four-year university setting, also in some graduate programs, as well as college graduates that are having consistent daily interaction with our young people, instructional and facilitative formats. And so this, even just by design and by our hiring practices, allows our young people to have that exposure to college. With the industry professionals, we're also able to provide opportunities for them to be a part of internships. With the expanded learning time, that also includes the summer. And we've had some great successes with partnerships, not only with our linked learning department, but also our city of Sacramento, where we're providing approximately about 55 students with internships throughout the summer in various city departments. These internships sometimes turn into school year-long opportunities for students to engage and to get these needed workplace skills and also 21st century skills. So it's been an opportunity to really engage not only the folks at our school sites, our expanded learning folks, but then also expanding to our folks in the community.
Thank you, Monroe. And actually, I'm going to just quickly reference this slide because we'll come back to it in just a minute when we start going into how do you incorporate linked learning and expanded learning into your LCAP. But just really touching on these quick bullet points here. Really, ultimately, these two approaches create an incredible opportunity to create systems within your schools and districts to allow for student and teacher input to really develop an academic program that not only is engaging to students, but that builds on local community resources and builds skill set for the students as they're working their way through it. It's an incredible opportunity to also bring in not just the teachers, but the after school and before school instructors, and help them collaborate in a more direct way so that there is a much more fluid experience for students and it's not cobbled together as we've done in years past. And it's also an opportunity to bring in partners into that discussion so that not only are we setting the clear expectations and providing the necessary supports for our instructors that are engaging with these students, but as we're developing those community partnerships, we're setting clear expectations from the get-go for folks to really engage in that collaboration. And so we'll come back to these in just a minute. So jumping over into the local control funding formula, I really want to just kind of present the big picture to you all. We have some wonderful webinars available for those that are interested in diving into it more deeply on our website, our local control funding formula website, and that's lcff.childrennow.org, and all of this will be sent out to you following the webinar. But at least for our purposes here, there are three kind of big picture items that I'd like for you to keep in mind about the LCFF. One, we've changed the way that we fund education as a state entirely. So no longer are school districts and school sites kind of hemmed into these categorical programs that funded very specific supports for students, but districts now have flexibility within how they allocate funding with an emphasis on providing equity so that students that we know require some additional supports, there's now room within district budgets to ensure that those supports are there for students. So a lot of what we've been talking about here, the wraparound services with social emotional development, with counseling, all of these pieces that tended to get left out of the pie in previous years because of the absence of funding now can be baked back in because the dollars are now not necessarily huge, but they're becoming available, and so districts can work with their school sites to help target those in more effective ways so that they're better serving their students. Really, ultimately, what is the biggest change that has come around as a result of the LCFF? And it is this approach to student-based funding. And so the goal with local control funding formula is to provide districts with that ability to meet their local need in a manner that they know that they can do it. And so no longer are they being pushed to implement certain programs that may or may not be successful depending on their capacity. Now districts are really given the opportunity to look at what their capacity is, to develop the necessary partnerships at the local level, and to then begin targeting their services specifically for those students that are really being lifted up as requiring of being of high need, which are the low-income English learners and foster youth. And really, as we've been talking about throughout, really the impact of the LCFF is creating that opportunity for districts to work with their local communities and stakeholders to identify what those opportunities are and where they can leverage each other's resources to ensure that students really do have access to a broad base of support and high-quality instructional programming. So the structural pieces surrounding the LCFF are a set of 8 priorities that the state has identified that every district needs to work towards, and many districts are already on a strong path towards achieving these, and so we just kind of want to touch upon them here. These 8 priorities are broken up into 3 big buckets, the first being conditions of learning. So ultimately within your local control accountability plan, you need to demonstrate how you're targeting and identifying expenditures and services that you are directing within your district to support high quality or to provide quality teacher instruction materials and facilities for your students, that you're aligning your coursework with standards, and that you're creating the necessary course access for students to graduate, ideally college and career ready. And so within the second bucket of pupil outcomes, as you can see here, really there's a focus on achievement. So within your local control accountability plan, you want to be able to highlight those efforts that you're engaging in as a district to support that achievement, and linked learning and expanded learning fit perfectly into that particular category. And so as you're engaging with your district decision makers, these are examples of pieces that you can make sure to lift up during the conversations in helping to create that awareness and support within your district for these 2 approaches. Local outcomes really give you the opportunity to identify some of those ways that you want to measure success for your students. So some innovative metrics that we are hearing from districts is what percentage of our student body completes their FAFSA form during their 11th grade year or 12th grade year. And so that's something that is not required by the state, but it's an example of what we're seeing statewide from what we're seeing from some of our partners statewide in incorporating some more local metrics into their local control accountability plan. And when it comes to that last bucket, this is where you really do see the direct connection with both linked learning and expanded learning. When it comes to parent involvement, pupil engagement, and creating a more engaging school climate, there's really very few better vehicles to be able to meet each of those priorities than linked learning or expanded learning, because it is student-centered, because it is leveraging those community partnerships. You're essentially being able to create an experience for folks that makes them want to be engaged in the school. And so it just is a wonderful opportunity that you don't want to pass up. And so just closing out the structural pieces of the local control accountability or local control funding formula, there's a big push for community engagement within it. We're seeing some partners doing an incredible job with it, but we also know that many districts have been subject to significant cuts over the years, and so may not necessarily have the infrastructure in place currently to support higher levels of community engagement. And so the local control funding formula creates a wonderful opportunity for districts to really hone in on that piece, because the more engaged their community is in the development process, as both Monroe and Teresa have spoken to directly, the stronger the program is, because you have that buy-in from folks. And so it's no longer something that's being done to them, it's something that they're a part of and helping to develop. The other key piece that we're going to be able to talk about briefly here is really identifying those key goals and metrics, services and expenditures that are being implemented by your district to meet those priorities that we just discussed. And so there's some key pieces that you can incorporate to make sure that as you're developing the infrastructure within your district for both linked learning and expanded learning, that you're incorporating these key pieces so that you're able to measure progress moving forward. The nice thing about the LCFF is that it builds in a reflection period on a yearly basis. So even though the local control accountability plan is pitched as a 3-year plan, there nevertheless is a need for districts to come back on a yearly basis and look at what they had described in the local control accountability plan for the previous year, make sure that it still makes sense for the current year's implementation, and make any necessary adjustments based on feedback and data so that they're continuing to improve their instructional programming moving forward. And finally, you know, the fourth component here is really identifying what those targeted services and expenditures are. And so many districts are doing identifying those services that they're providing to the targeted communities and for all of their students. So it's a great opportunity to, within this section of the LCAP, to incorporate language that talks about the linked learning programming and the expanded learning programming that you're doing. And we'll talk about some of the kind of more targeted types of supports that you can put into that section that will help you build this programming moving forward. And so just in closing out with this piece, really the local control accountability plan gives you the opportunity to do some critical asset mapping to identify those local partnerships and collaborations that you can leverage for this work, to identify those metrics to show how your implementation of linked learning and expanded learning is benefiting these students. And I'm going to turn back to Teresa to talk a little bit about what they're doing to make sure that, you know, some goals and some metrics are being incorporated into their work to show how students are benefiting from this. And the biggest point for those of you that are just starting to think about linked learning and expanded learning incorporating into your district is the professional development, because the professional development for both of these can directly benefit a lot of the work that's taking place around Common Core, and definitely the push for college and career, as Teresa emphasized earlier. And so we've talked about the common goals. Really, this is an opportunity to create instructional programs that do prepare kids with 21st century skills. And so it's something you really don't want to pass up. And I want to create the space for us to ask some questions for folks. I've not seen... So if you have any questions, send them our way. I also have some questions myself of the presenters, and so we'll open it up with that. But if folks have questions, please do submit them, and we can get to them. And so kind of going into that, what I just was talking about with regard to the metrics, Teresa, you mentioned some of the work that you guys have been doing around it's been a 10-year process to get us to where we are in Sac City Unified. So how have you been able to track that progress for students so that when the opportunity presents itself, whether it's set of school site teachers or students that are coming to you and say, we want to do this, that you're able to engage them and the principal in creating that local buy-in?
For Link Learning, we've been using some of the documents provided by ConnectEd, looking at the pathway critical and quality components and assessing that and working with pathways as they develop action plans. We also look at a variety of standard metrics, and then such as the high school exit exam, formerly the achievement test. We're in a little bit of a vacuum right now with the move to SBAC, but looking at the SAT, PSAT exams that we have, also looking at GPA, disaggregated by gender and ethnicity within the pathways, and then district as a whole. We also use student satisfaction and teacher engagement surveys.
Excellent. Yeah, so as you can see, there's a whole slew of tools that can be leveraged to identify where those opportunities are and how to build out your program at the school site level. I wanted to, as we're thinking about this, I wanted to point out some additional resources that you have access to directly from the PowerPoint, as well as that we'll be sending out in the follow-up email for folks. But just going off of this quick list here, I referenced the LCFF website that Children Now has created, and it centralizes a whole slew of webinars that you can access that cover everything from what we're talking about today to how to incorporate other pieces, including early learning within your program. And some more detailed breakdowns of the local control funding formula. ConnectEd has a wonderful report called Using Learning Creatively to Prepare Students for College and Career. Excellent resource for educators. And Teresa, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about that.
Yes, this is a report where we work with Alliance for Excellent Education in Washington, D.C., along with the Center for American Progress, looking at linked learning as a way to support students in using time effectively. To talk about many of the themes that we had talked about on this call, providing coherent experiences for students both in school and out of school.
Perfect, thank you. And you can see the link directly on here, and again, we'll be sending it out. And also, the Partnership for Children and Youth just released its report, Time Well Spent, I apologize, not spend, school district strategies that help students get the most from expanded learning time. And Jess, could you give a quick little synopsis of it?
Sure. Similar to what Teresa was talking about, we looked at 8 school districts and tried to identify what strategies they're using at the school district level to build more intentionality around how they're using time after school. And there's actually a case study in there around a school in Oakland, which is really, again, combining their linked learning and expanded learning time efforts, both at the site and district level.
Perfect, thank you. And you also see links directly to the pages on the Sacramento City Unified School District's websites that will connect you to resources for the high school redesign as well as the expanded learning. And so I apologize for having to kind of just run through all of this, but we're running out of time, and we wanted to respect everybody's commitment to being here today. And really just want to give you the opportunity.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
This is Jessica. I was hoping that Sac City would be able to also share their graduate profile, because I feel like that's a really useful resource in thinking how it relates to in viewing LCAPs. So.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I will forward that to Eduardo, and then he can include it with the webinar.
I'd love to borrow out of your 3 years of work.
Yes.
So that's a lot of work.
We want to learn from each other and not have to reinvent the wheel here. So yes, that'll be included within this set of links and materials that we'll be sending out as a follow-up to this call. So here you have our direct email. So if there was anything that came up where you would like to do some follow-up, please do follow up with folks. We all would love to hear from you and continue to provide you supports. For when we were thinking about this 1-hour presentation, it felt like a long time, but now we've seen that it's disappeared before our eyes. And so I just really want to thank everybody for taking the time for being with us here today, and for really giving us the opportunity to kind of share about some of these best practices that we're seeing within the field, and are looking forward to hearing from you and continuing to support you all in your work. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful holiday season.